In the not too distant future, stuck in a quarantine, evil Rob from Tokyo lives, was planning something mean. He invited a guy by the name of Mike, just a kaiju groupie he didn't like. Never before had he been so bored, so he conked him on the noggin and threw him into Discord.
I'll send him kaiju movies. The worst I can find. He'll have to sit and stream them all, and I'll monitor his mind.
Now keep in mind Mike can't control where the movies begin or end. He'll try and keep his sanity with the help of his podcast friends.
Podcast roll call. Kaiju Conversations. Tokyo Lives. Kaiju Groupie. Monster vs. Men. Kaiju Weekly. Giant Monster BS. Monster Island Film Vault. Gargantucast.
If you're wondering how Mike video streams and all these kaiju facts, repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. For Kaiju Quarantine to Trash Mountain.
Hey there, groupies. Mike here. Kaiju Quarantine is back, but I'm a little bit scared. Me and the other podcasters are going to need your help as we attempt to climb Trash Mountain and riff 10 of the most awesomely awful movies in the kaiju genre, including Godzilla vs. Megalon, Gamera vs. Giron, and The Giant Claw. But what mystery film awaits us at the peak of Trash Mountain? Only that son of a minya Rob knows. And it all begins Friday, May 22nd at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time and runs through Sunday, May 24th. Be prepared to spend an epic and hilarious Memorial Day weekend with your favorite Giant Monster podcasts on the official Kaiju Quarantine Discord server. Space is limited, so you want to go ahead and reserve your spot today. And remember, Kaiju Quarantine, come together right now over Kaiju.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Weekly, the weekly podcast that introduces you to the wide world of giant monster movies. I am your host, Travis, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Michael.
As always, I'm right here.
And we're also joined by a special guest, Chris, the co-host of Gargantucast and writer for Something Ghoulish.
Glad to be on the show, guys.
Yeah, welcome, Chris.
Yeah, welcome. We're glad to have you. Your podcast, Gargantucast, was one of the first giant monster podcasts that I subscribed to when I started looking around at other giant monster podcasts to check out and kind of check out the competition.
Oh, I was like, because I like your podcast. It's like the competition.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You guys are great. You guys, I love you guys' enthusiasm. So for anyone who might be unfamiliar with Gargantucast, do you want to introduce yourself, your podcast, all that stuff?
Yeah. So I'm Chris, the co-host of Gargantucast, as well as basically the producer as well. I basically hit me and my co-host Cole and guests. We usually just dive into kaiju movies, tokusatsu, and general monster movies as we try to find more informative ways of explaining, because everyone does reviews a lot. Like a lot of people do reviews, but what we try to take an angle more like analyzing the socio-political themes as well as place where these films were released and what genres they reflect at the time, as well as we just, be funny along the way.
Yeah,
I think that's where you guys are excellent, is because you do approach these films from sort of a cultural perspective. And I think that way you guys can stay relevant, and you're more, and that just makes you guys more than just your average monster movie review podcast.
Yeah, because we don't want reviews because, you know, we notice, like, not to knock on you guys, but, you know, a lot of people on the internet have taken the idea of reviews and it's kind of like same old, same old. So
Yeah.
what we try to do is, again, trying to, like, you know, start a conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, and again, one of the things that really stuck out to me about your podcast is you guys have a lot of enthusiasm. You have a lot of energy. Your podcasts are really high energy.
I mean, that's thanks to my co-host.
Yeah, he brings a lot of it, but man, you guys are so much fun to listen to. Just the energy that you guys bring to the Kaiju podcasting world.
That's just how we talk in real life in general when we're together.
That's awesome.
It also
so,
helps. I was gonna say
Uh,
it also helps too, Chris, that it seems like you guys are legitimate friends off screen
No,
or
no,
off camera and off
No,
audio.
I borderline live in his house when I'm not
Right.
at my place.
Yeah. So there's always that. It's always really good when you're friends with your co-host because you can play off of each other, and I think that's part of what makes Gargantucast so entertaining.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so we're glad to have you, and we had to have you on this episode specifically because I was listening to you guys. I think it was probably earlier this year, maybe January or February, and Cole mentioned how much you love the topic for this episode of our podcast.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And I was like immediately like, hey man, we gotta have you on whenever we talk about this subject.
Oh yeah.
So, but before we get into the main subject of this week, we're going to talk about the Kaiju movie news. So yeah, the first bit of news that that I want to get into is some sad news. We had legendary Kaiju suit modeler Izo Kaimai, I think.
Kaimai, yes.
Yeah, Kaimai, who helped create the original Godzilla 1954 suit, in addition to a lot of other Showa era Kaiju. He passed away on April 24th. He was 90 years old. So sad news.
He lived a long life, though. He lived a long life.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good innings. It's not like he didn't die young, but it's still sad to see someone who was
of course,
so closely tied to the Kaiju movies and everything, and one of the creators of Godzilla, really, who helped create Godzilla, pass away.
Definitely, like a lot of people, like E.G. Tsuburaya definitely helped, but he wasn't the sole person doing everything. We got to give credit to every single person who helped in the effects.
Sure.
Yeah, and really, he was probably the only one of the, would you say, like, fathers of Godzilla who was still left alive, because pretty much everybody who you could say like were directly involved in creating Godzilla have already passed away.
If I'm not
Haruo Oshiro, Akira Fukube, Tomonuki Tanaka,
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, Izo was one of the key players in kind of giving us what we know now as Godzilla, because I think the original sketches, he was more amphibian like instead of reptile like, and so I think
from what I remember, first like E.G. Tsuburaya pitched an octopus, but that would have been like a nightmare at the time. Then Tomonuki Tanaka had the idea of a dinosaur, but they had the effects team work on it, and Izo was the one that basically made a workable design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so sad news, and like we said, it's kind of the end of I wouldn't say end of an era, but just kind of it brings really a closing to that chapter of Godzilla, having the last real person who was directly involved in creating the Godzilla we know and love to pass away. So some sad news, but like we said, he had a long life. So, but on a happier note, we do want to talk about this event that's coming up. We hinted to it last week, and since we have Chris here on the podcast and he's involved in this, we want to talk about it. We're officially announcing Kaiju Quarantine 2.0.
Trash Mountain.
Trash man.
I am so scared and excited at the same time.
Oh, I'm excited. Me and Cole on a pastime, we just dig through our Hedorah's heat when it comes to movies, and we just love trashy movies.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who listens to this podcast can kind of tell that I enjoy watching terrible movies and just, having fun with them. I mean, we just did Night of the Lepus just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, we've got Kaiju Quarantine. If anyone's not familiar with the original Kaiju Quarantine, it was an idea to bring together a bunch of giant monster podcasts and do a movie marathon and have everyone who was available, any fans or listeners, to join us in watching these movies and enjoying the commentary from different kaiju podcasts. So this time around, we've got a lot of the same people involved in the first one. We've got Kaiju Weekly, Kaiju Groupie. We've got Monster Island Filmball, Gargantucast. We also have Monsters vs. Men, Kaiju Conversation, and Tokyo Lives. Now, the thing about Tokyo Lives is Rob, who's one of the hosts on there, is actually the one who curated the movies this time around. But we also added Giant Monster BS as another podcast. So if you like any of those podcasts and you want to hear their commentary, please join us on our Discord server. We have a Discord server for Kaiju Quarantine. That's where we're going to be streaming the movies and doing this 3-day movie marathon. So that's going to be Friday, May 22nd through Sunday, May 24th.
Memorial Day.
Yep.
Yeah, Memorial Day weekend. And do you think we should give some of the hints to some of the movies that we're going to be talking about, or?
I kind of want them to be surprised.
Yeah,
but you can, Travis. Listen, we can give them maybe just a little taste, but.
Okay, well, if anyone was part of the first Kaiju Quarantine, you heard me and Rob talk a lot about Yeti, Giant of the 20th Century. I know Chris knows a lot about this one too.
Yeah, it was our episode. It was our Christmas episode.
Yep. So that's one of the movies. We are also going to be covering The Giant Claw. We're going to be watching the Crater Lake Monster, Gamera versus Giron. And then we also have a mystery film, because the idea behind this is that Rob, who is curating this, is slowly working from the least trashy to the most trashy film. And the final one is completely a mystery to all of us except for him. So that's going to be exciting.
It is. It's going to be. It's gonna be hilarious. It really is. I'm looking forward to being on Crater Lake Monster with you, Chris. And
it's gonna be my first time, actually.
Really? Okay, so
yeah, I've never seen Crater Lake.
I am no longer a Yeti virgin, so I watched the full.
Man,
I watched the full version of Yeti on. I think I found it on Archive or YouTube or something. And my God, that's all I can say is. My God.
I was hoping that you would be surprised when you saw that movie.
No. I just went ahead and ripped the Band-Aid clean off and maybe took a little bit of hair with it.
Yeti was actually an impulse buy when I was at Spooky Empire with Anthony from Something Ghoulish last year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they have, I forget which company it is that just is putting out the Blu-ray.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know the Blu-ray was coming out. I had the DVD. And, it was like back in it was a 2014 DVD, and oh God, that negative is now like a treasured item. Someone needs to find a negative for that movie.
It is something else. So I'm excited for that one.
Like there's VHS riff, but I think this is like a 35 millimeter riff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
this is a projector. This is a VHS on a projector riff.
Oh wow. Wow, that's crazy. So
I love Travis's description of Yeti because he's went on record of saying it's like a porno but without the sex.
Yeah.
It has the music. I love just like how they try to make the Yeti sexy.
Yeah.
I mean, he has luscious hair. That
Gorgeous hair.
beautiful mane. That like Chris Hemsworth has great hair, but I think the Yeti is his ultimate enemy.
Yeah,
Obviously.
absolutely gorgeous hair. It is such a crazy movie. Oh man, I cannot wait for this. So, like we said, if anyone is interested in joining us for this 3-day movie marathon, even for just one or two of the movies, we are going to be doing it. That is Memorial Day weekends, Friday, May 22nd through Sunday, May 24th. And you can join our Discord server. I will include the link down in the bottom of the show notes, and so you can join that and have fun with us. I know in the last one, I like to talk about how in the last Kaiju Quarantine, when we got to Final Wars, it just went absolutely nuts.
That's because half of us were tired.
Half of us were tired. Some of us were drunk. Michael passed
little.
out.
Yeah, a little bit. I'll admit that I did not pace myself well on Rygo. So I didn't quite make it all the way through Final Wars.
Oh man, so that's gonna be fun. All right, well, let's move on with the news. That's exciting news, but we've got some more to cover. One of a character who is pretty well known in the Godzilla community, or an actor who's pretty well known in the Godzilla community, is going to be returning to tokusatsu. He's going to be joining Ultraman Z. This is Jun Hashizume. He played Lieutenant Koji Shinjo from Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and
the best character in that movie.
Yes, the best character. The best character. Although I do kind of like, I like Miki in that one too, because she does more than she does in some of the other movies.
Like on its own, Miki's great, but when the grand scheme of her character in the Heisei films, she took a complete 180.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, he's going to be coming to Ultraman Z, the new Ultraman series that is on its way. He will play Kojiro Inada, leader of the Anti-Monster Task Force, Storage.
Names for these organizations.
Yeah, I know. Ultraman just has some of the craziest names for their teams.
But is Storage an acronym, or is that like the legit?
It's all caps, so maybe it's an acronym.
Yeah, I think it is an acronym for something.
That is a long freaking acronym.
It is. It really is.
And people say SHIELD from the Marvel movies has a long acronym.
Yeah, true. But yeah, so that's going to be fun seeing him. We're getting more and more information about Ultraman Z. So I'm looking.
They're really hyping up Z.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So that's it for that bit of news. There's nothing really else to say other than it's exciting. He's going to be in it. And it sounds like he's going to be playing a major part too.
I think he's going to be the leader of Storage.
Mm-hmm, yeah, he's the leader of it. So
he's basically like in every Ultraman series. There's always the lead of the organization.
Right. There's always the captain.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is he's going to have his very own storage unit.
I swear, if they don't call their machine storage unit, I'll be very upset. Like every Ultraman series has the vehicles. If they're not called storage units, I'd be very disappointed.
Oh,
I'll be a little angry.
I think I'd be disappointed too, because it just wants to be. It just wants to be made fun of. A name like Storage wants to be made fun of.
Not even made fun of. It's such a brilliant pun that if you don't take it, why bother?
Right, exactly. Why choose that name if you're not going to actually play around with it?
True.
Oh man. Moving on to the next bit of news, we had a quote from James Flower, who's the producer at Arrow and video project manager for the Gamera movie set that is coming out soon. He said online, "We've got everything that's been on the previous American editions and more in terms of extras, and in terms of the dubs, all of them. And I mean literally all of them. So no stone has been left unturned, and fans should be very, very happy when they see it."
I
So
know that I know Chris and I are extremely excited for this release. Now I'm going to
Oh,
preface.
I already pre-ordered it.
Oh, same here. Same here.
Yeah.
I know I'm not the biggest biggest Gamera fan. I love the Heisei trilogy. I think it's a masterpiece. There's only maybe 2 or 3 in the Showa era that I actually enjoy. But I'm super excited for this.
Yeah.
Same. Like it's definitely I'm so happy for this, but I'm a little frustrated just how it's like, Toho, this really bit Toho in the butt for being so controlling for the Criterion set. And I love the Criterion set. It was my birthday. It was my Christmas gift last year from my mom.
Right.
And it's a fantastic set. Don't get me wrong. And I'm glad it exists. But it's very, I know Criterion can do better and they want to do better. But like, Toho is just a complete, butt monkey about it.
Yeah,
and
their hands were completely tied with that Criterion release. Chris, if you've seen any of the Champion releases,
I have.
Yeah, they're so much better than what Criterion was. I will say what Criterion was allowed to put out, because I'm not going to place blame on Criterion for that, because it was up to Toho what they were allowed to actually work with.
And place the blame all on Toho because Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we love Toho, but they have their moments where we don't love them so much.
Yeah, I think Chris Yount from Kaiju Cast, when the Criterion Collection was announced and everything was shown about it, he made a good point of saying that set was never meant to be for Kaiju fans. It was meant to be for people who like Criterion. And so that's why you don't have a lot of supplemental stuff like you might get in this Gamera set. Like, I mean, the amount of stuff you're getting, you've got all of the artwork from Matt Frank, you've got the book, you've got the comic book that goes along with it.
2 comics. You get the the Dark Horse book and Matt Frank's fan comic. Well, the prequel comic. And there's still stuff to be announced, and not to mention all special features from past releases. So that includes the Shout Factory releases and the Mill Creeks.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is obviously a set for fans, whereas the Criterion wasn't really meant to be a set for fans. But when it comes to the cuts of the movies that they were allowed to use and the subtitles that they were allowed to include and the dubbed versions that they were allowed to include, that definitely, it's just like they were really hamstrung by Toho.
Chris, do we know if even the Showa era films are going to be restored in 4K, or is it just going to be the Heisei era?
As far as, they said more stuff to be announced when it comes to the how the films are, but as of right now, it is currently the Heisei films.
Okay.
That are 4K.
I'm sure the Showa era films are going to look great. I was just kind of curious if they were going to be able to restore those in like full 4K resolution, or if it was just going to be an upscaled HD.
From what I also heard in that announcement, that they also got another Kaiju release in the works that was part of the deal they had with Katakiwa.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's set in stone, like what the announcement is, but I'm going to place bets. We're going to get a Daimajin trilogy from Arrow. I'm going to call it.
That'll be interesting. Okay.
I have a feeling that's going to, like they said, another Kaiju thing from Katakiwa. I was just like, it's Daimajin.
Yeah,
that's the one that makes the most sense to me, because Daimajin probably is the second largest Kaiju thing that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it seems like they realized just how hamstrung Toho was, so they decided like them and Tsuburaya are actually taking advantage of Western fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they realized. I think they realize now how hungry we are for this stuff. Now, let me just preface this by saying it's still a niche market over here in the U.S., but still, there's a lot of fans that would be willing to invest some serious money into these releases if they would put them out.
Yeah, for sure. So I like that like you said, that the companies are starting to realize that these fans, even though it is still a niche market, they can make a profit from it. And they can really, if they do a good job, then the fans will be there. The fans will just eat it up.
Right, and not to harp on this too much, but this Gamera set really comes in at a price point that a lot of folks and a lot of fans can actually afford. I think. It started out at 180, I think, and then it's dropped down. If you went ahead and pre-ordered on Amazon, I think I checked it the other day. It's dropped down all the way to 130, like 129 and some change. Mm-hmm. So for a set this great, like all the stuff we're going to be getting with it, I mean, $130 is really, really good deal, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. The next bit of news that we can get into is in a recent interview with the YouTube channel Pixel Dan, Randy Falk from NECA revealed that there may be a brief hiatus period coming soon where NECA isn't allowed to make Godzilla figures.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he said this is due to Playmates Toys having the license for Godzilla vs. Kong and the film's owners not wanting there to be any competition, even though the companies occupy different areas of the market.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it makes sense. You've got Godzilla vs. Kong coming up. Playmates has the licensing for that particular movie. So to keep competition down and to keep from splitting the market, they're just going to take a hiatus from Godzilla toys.
My mindset about this is last year was Godzilla King of the Monsters. The Jack Pacific toys were meant for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And NECA, you got NECA and Tamashii Nations. They made stuff for the adult collectors. So what I'm thinking is, hopefully, Playmates can make something akin to like Hasbro's Marvel Legends stuff. Because Hasbro released like for comic books and Star Wars and all that stuff. They have stuff and Power Rangers now, stuff for kids as well as stuff for that works for kids, but also for more adult collectors.
Right,
so
the more detailed ones, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that with Godzilla vs. Kong, we get, better figures, because I don't need to get another Godzilla, like Legendary Godzilla. I'm fine with my Monster Arts 2019, but I would like to get a really good 6-inch Kong, Monster vs. Kong, as well as maybe they make a figure of a 6-inch figure of Spoiler.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not mention the Spoiler, because
Yeah.
But yeah, like hopefully they make figures for detailed, better fake 6-inch scale figures for those, because it would really suck. Because I was actually looking forward to NECA actually finally making a Kong figure.
Yeah, I think that if this goes ahead and NECA is taking a break from the figures and so that Playmates can have the market all to itself, then that has to mean that Playmates has something in mind that NECA would be in competition to.
It would mean that they would have something that's coming down the line that's a little bit more higher end than the plastic.
Because otherwise, why would they do that? Because they're like it says even in the interview that they occupy different parts of the market. So there's no reason, unless there is something that's going to cross over into each other's market.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I was kind of curious when I first saw this, like, okay, so what does Playmates have in the back? Like, what are they working on that is good enough to compete with NECA? Now, NECA has really stepped up their game in the last couple of years, and I would put them almost on par with Monster Arts. I feel like, just from my personal perspective, Monster Arts is on the decline, whereas NECA is on the rise as far as their sculpts and their affordability and just some other factors that are in their favor. So it makes me really curious as to what Playmates has up their sleeve that NECA would be willing to bow out of this market temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot. Oh, go ahead, Travis. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, it's the one thing a lot of people were saying, like, oh, I don't trust Playmates because those really bad Shin and Space Godzilla.
Yeah.
But I heard a theory from Steven's Toy Reviews that if you guys watch him, he's like one of the biggest like toy reviewers.
Yeah, I've seen him before.
He made a theory that made sense. So from what I heard, the reason why those figures look like that, remember, Godzilla vs. Kong was originally supposed to come out in March this year.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And Playmates has an exclusive deal with Walmart, but the movie got delayed, so they can't release the Godzilla vs. Kong stuff. But they need to release something, because I guess they had to release something for Walmart. So I'm guessing they asked to borrow the molds from different Bandai figures as well as the NECA Shin Godzilla. And these were rushed. And I don't think they're reflective of Playmate's total like quality.
Capabilities. Yeah,
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's not reflective on their capability. It's just they needed to put something in the market. They needed to make some money. They needed to probably fulfill a deal with Walmart at that time. And so they rushed. And, you know, Shin looks rushed, but ultimately I think these Playmates toys they're not for me and you, Chris. They're for, you know, they're more for children. They're not for the serious collector. They're not for someone who takes this kind of stuff seriously. So yeah.
Understandable. I will say the Gigan looks pretty good.
Yeah, the Gigan does look. It's probably the better one of the. It's the better one of the set for sure.
My favorite meme, I guess you'd call it a meme, but my favorite picture I made that tied into one of our early episodes of this podcast back when Steven was still on was that picture of the Playmates Shin Godzilla next to that dog, Steven. That internet meme.
Yeah.
And it's just like, because it looks just like it. He's got the overbite and everything. It's just, oh man, it looks so cool. It looks just like Steven. But yeah, something else that was interesting that came up in that interview with Randy Falk is he mentioned that NECA also still has the rights to some non-Godzilla Toho kaiju. So any ideas? I know, Michael, you know more about collector side of things. Chris, you know a little bit more. You know more than I do. And so do you guys have any ideas what non-Godzilla Toho kaiju that NECA might have?
A Mothra makes sense. Gigan makes sense.
Probably, I was going to say probably Rodan and Mothra because King of the Monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I would love to see them do a was it 64 Mothra.
Yeah, I like to see 64. I want to see 56 Rodan. It's one of my favorite suits.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, so okay, yeah, that makes sense. It'd be interesting to see. I want to get into collecting, but it just it's so hard to get.
It's a rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole for sure. I started out with NECA and SH Monster Arts, and it's only gotten more expensive from there at this point. But yeah, as far as Toho kaiju that's not Godzilla, I'd say I'm gonna agree with Chris and say Rodan, Mothra, and then I'll even throw in Gigan, or maybe they'll give the collectors a NECA version of King Ghidorah. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if they would do a King Ghidorah.
Yeah, they said they wouldn't do King Ghidorah because quote unquote too expensive, even though they've done the Alien Queen around the scale that would have made sense. I'm guessing the reason why they said that, but I think another reason is because I think the Monster Arts Ghidorah was so hyped up.
Yeah.
And it would have been, and it was actually much cheaper than I expected it to be. Because I actually got it. It was like 180, which is, actually not bad compared to how a scale Monster Arts figure like that. So maybe it's because it's around that price point and NECA didn't want to, because it'll just be like maybe $100, like $80 to even $50 cheaper. So there's really not much of a difference, because like a Monster Arts Godzilla and a Monster Art and a NECA Godzilla, there is a significant price difference.
Right.
So yeah, it probably wasn't that significant enough to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's some ideas on what they might be coming up with later down the line, probably after the hiatus that they take after Godzilla versus Kong, whenever that's going to happen. We don't even know anymore.
I expect some of this stuff to be really hyped up, not necessarily in 2020, but in 2021 after the film's hopefully been released. All these places are gonna go nuts with merchandise, I feel like, and it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah,
especially with Toy Fair next year.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, moving into the last bit of news I want to talk about before we move into the main subject is that yesterday I was on a or yesterday, I recorded an episode of Cinematica Animalia with Sam Perrin, who's been a guest on this podcast. I don't know when the episode is going to air, so it may be a couple of weeks from now, but we had a lot of fun talking about Godzilla 1998 and the legendary Godzilla and comparing the two, and just we had a lot of fun talking about those things. And so wanted to give a shout out to Cinematica Animalia. If you have not listened to them and you want to give them a shot, maybe the episode that I'm on and that's coming out in a couple of weeks will be something to listen to give you an idea of what the show is all about.
Yeah, we really enjoy anytime we get to have Sam on the show. It's a pleasure, and we really are big fans of his podcast. It's super interesting.
Yeah, I enjoy having him on. He has a very unique perspective on giant monsters because of being an ecologist and doing the podcast with a vet who kind of brings in the physiology side of things. It's a lot of fun, a lot of interesting things that you get from his podcast that you wouldn't get from other podcasts like us, who are just a couple of idiots talking about giant monster movies.
I wouldn't call us idiots, Travis. Come on.
I call myself an idiot. I couldn't remember Tanaka's name on the podcast, by the way. So if people go and listen to, I am so bad with names, and I work overnight and then have, because Sam is 7 hours ahead of my time zone, so having to record at a weird time, I was like, what's the producer, the one who basically created Godzilla? And so I could not remember his name. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get skewered for this, but my brain just is not working.
I have my skewer ready for when that episode drops, Travis.
So if anybody's listening to this and they go listen to that, forgive me, my brain was not working at the time.
You know when that episode's going to drop? Did it give you a timeline?
I think in 2 weeks. I think in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think they're bi-weekly. I'm pretty sure. I just couldn't remember.
Yeah, I can't. I think the next episode that they do that's coming up is a follow-up to their Jurassic Park episode. And then after that, I think might be the one that I was on. So, yeah, just keep an eye out. And I will, whenever it does drop, I will let everybody know. And, yeah, so now we can move into our main topic for this week. So the trivia question that I asked last week to hint to the topic for this week was, what Japanese TV show inspired by an American superhero helped popularize giant robots in tokusatsu? So the live action, because at the time they were already popular in anime, but what helped popularize them in the live action tokusatsu series. So we want to give a shout out to Alexis Russo, David Connell, and Nathan Marchand from Monster Island Film Vault for getting the answer right and saying Spiderman. But we also have Damon, I don't know how to say his last name, so I'm just going to say Damon, who said Tetsujin 21, aka Gigantor.
Oh, that's a classic. That's a classic.
Yeah, very classic anime. Really kind of gave birth to the giant robot genre. But so that's a really good guess, but that wasn't the answer. Jimmy from NASA, the producer of Monster Island Film Vault, said Captain Japan.
That was the next one,
which I'm going to talk about in the fun facts segment.
Wait, there's really a thing. There's really a thing called Captain Japan. I thought he was just riffing off of Captain Marvel.
It's not called. It's not called Captain Japan, but there is kind of a Captain Japan. Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Thorax, one of our Patreon supporters, said Johnny Sacco and his giant robot, which is a really good guess because that predates the show that we're talking about, Spider-Man, by probably about 10 years, not quite 10 years, but it didn't.
Late 60s, early 70s, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. But the difference between that and Spider-Man is Spider-Man was a piloted robot, so a mech, whereas the atomic robo in Johnny Sacco was independent. You know, it had its own thoughts and intelligence.
It's like Gigantor.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It was very similar to Gigantor, but that's a really good guess, and I cannot wait to talk about Johnny Sacco on this podcast because I actually really like that show.
I still need to see it.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Nick Blackler, who always gives us the funny answers, gave us Diners, Drive-Ins, and Mechs, starring our favorite fire shirt wearing, frosted tip styling, Camaro cruising robot Gear Fieri.
Can someone please draw that? That would be hilarious.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Or
I want to see
a really terrible Photoshop. I think that would even be better.
Yeah, terrible Photoshop is so good. Oh man! So thanks, Nick, for always giving us the funny answer. So this week we are going to be covering the first 3 episodes of Spiderman, the Japanese Spider-Man series. And so just to go through the cast and crew, we've got Shinji Todo as Takuya, the main character, Rika Miura as Hitomi, who's I think that's his girlfriend, right?
Girl character.
Yeah, the
girl.
Yeah, the girl is Zumi Oyama as his sister.
Other girl.
Yeah. Yoshiharu Yabuki as the annoying character who is in every TV show, which is the kid.
The Kenny,
yes. Mitsuo Ando as Professor Monster. I love that character. I love that actor. He's so good in that. Yukie Kagawa as his subordinate, Amazoness. And so Takuya was basically like our Peter Parker character, and that was played by Shinji. But then every time he transformed into Spider-Man, you had a different actor playing the Spider-Man character, which was Hirofume Koga.
Makes sense because Shinji's hair would not fit in that suit. Trust me, I have put on Spider-Man. I have cosplayed Spider-Man before. You need a haircut beforehand.
Yeah, that poofy 70s hair would have made Spider-Man's head so massive under that mask. Oh man. So we're going to take this one episode at a time. So let's start with the first episode. Michael, do you want to do the plot breakdown for the first episode?
Yeah, sure. I say the plot breakdown, if I can talk. Reads like this. Takuya is a hot-rodding young man with no sense of responsibility until one day his father is killed by an evil invading army. He meets an alien from the planet Spider who gives him all the powers and weapons of the Spider-Man we all know and love, like telepathic powers, a car, a spaceship, and a giant robot.
You know, all the things that Spider-Man has.
Exactly.
I mean, in fairness, during the 70s, there was the Spider-Mobile.
Yeah, the Spider.
True, I forgot about that.
But that was meant to be a joke.
Right, the dumbest thing.
Okay, yeah, just to get it out of there, not only I am a huge Kaiju nerd, I am a huge comic nerd, especially with Spider-Man. I literally, on one of my walls, I have basically... I don't want to call it a shrine because that would sound creepy, but I have like a mural of valuable issues I have of Spider-Man.
Oh, wow.
I actually have,
Chris, you can call it a shrine if you want to.
I actually have a issue of Superior Spider-Man signed by Stan Lee before he passed.
Oh,
wow.
Nice. The only signed copy of Spider-Man that I have is a Spider Island that's signed by Dan Slott because...
I actually have 2 issues signed by Dan. I have an issue of Spider-Man 700 and an issue of Amazing 17 with it was the minimal variant.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan too. I have been since I was a kid, and I used to collect comic books, and my main ones I collected was Spider-Man comics. I had a ton of Spider-Man comics for a while that I ended up selling to make room in my very, very tiny apartment.
Weak.
Yep.
I know. So we're coming at this from the point of view of already being tokusatsu fans, already being Spider-Man fans, and seeing this show that just combines all of that together is so fantastic. Now, I want to talk to Michael specifically a little bit because, Michael, you are not necessarily a Spider-Man fan.
I am not, but I enjoy Spider-Man. I have enjoyed Spider-Man media in the past. Specifically, Spider-Man 3 is my favorite Spider-Man. No, I'm kidding. It's not. It's not. I'm joking about that. But yeah, I'm not a huge comic book nerd like you two. But I am aware of Spider-Man. I like Spider-Man. But this series in particular, I'm gonna say that I went into this completely green, not even having a clue what's going to happen. And all I can say is, yeah, wow. All I can say.
Wow.
Man, can we just say 70s tokusatsu had some amazing intro songs?
Oh, yes. That's just so great. So
And
great.
I will probably come at this from not necessarily a Spider-Man fan, but a Power Rangers fan, because there is some parallels here that I remember from watching the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers back in the 90s.
And there's a very good reason for that, which I will get into in our fun fact segment, because there's some very strong ties between this Japanese Spider-Man and Power Rangers. So we'll get into that in the fun fact segment. So just talking about this first episode, let's go down the line. Chris, what are the things you enjoyed about this episode, this very first episode?
First of all, I do love just seeing the novel, like it's a novelty, yeah, but just seeing the character of Spider-Man, which is a intrinsically American character, interpreted in a Japanese lens. It is very fascinating just seeing what can translate well and what can't. I do like how Takaya, the main character, starts out arrogant like Peter was in his original first appearance, because like Peter, when he got the spider powers, was kind of an arrogant douche. He's like, I'm not gonna be a superhero. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make money. And with our main character, because it's a show, they kind of have to fasten things a bit. He was already arrogant from the start, and I kind of like that. And Leo Pardon is just one of the best live action mechas, like, of all time. And even the fight choreography is just so good for the most part.
Yeah.
And I know one thing, Stan Lee actually preferred this show over the late 70s, early 80s live action Spider-Man show, because they actually bothered to make the Spider-Man acrobatic and fast.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, and I will touch on again in the fun fact segment. But the Stan Lee really enjoyed not only this show, but he enjoyed a lot of the tokusatsu shows from that time period. He really enjoyed a lot of them. So it's so interesting.
He's also a huge Godzilla fan.
Yeah. So I love that nowadays most people think of this show as, oh, that silly Japanese version of Spider-Man. But in reality, like, this was a hugely popular show. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, like this was immensely popular in Japan. Like a lot of people think like it was just a one-off thing. No, it lasted for a good while. Even had its own movie.
Yeah, it did. So Michael, what are some things you liked about the first episode of Spider-Man?
I was pleasantly surprised how impressed I was with just the suit. Because I thought to myself going into this, and this is going to make me sound like a real douche, but I thought, well, okay, knock off Spider-Man from Japan. It's going to look crappy. But no, I was pleasantly surprised that the set design, the suit design, everything except for maybe Professor Monster looked awesome, and I was really, really surprised by that, especially Leopardon. I hope I said that right. Was awesome to see, like, a really good mech, and I just really enjoyed it. And to Chris's point, I like how they did kind of just start from a place of he was already arrogant, he was already a douche, but then once he got his Spidey powers, he was instantly humbled. And I know that's, kind of, it's been diluted down a little bit because it's only like 24 minutes long. But yeah, I think the first episode was a good setup. I think the first episode was paced well, and it gave you enough to keep you interested through the entire series. So I know that we're only going to be doing 3 episodes this time around, but I've actually watched up to 8 so far, and I've enjoyed what I've seen.
It gets addictive, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I have gotten no work done in the last 2 days just because of it.
You guys mentioned how Takuya is kind of a douche at the beginning of the first episode. One of the things that stuck out to me was he was such a douche. He was running his motorcycle in a very enclosed space. Mm-hmm. Like, that did not seem like it was very healthy.
In fairness, it is not a Spider-Man without making bad decisions.
True. I put some things in my dislikes, but they're not really dislikes. It was just little things that made me laugh about the show. Because to be fair, like, as much as we really enjoy the show, it is of its time.
Mm-hmm.
It is
definitely. Yeah, it's very 70s.
It's very 70s, and it's so 70s that I just enjoy the heck out of how 70s it is. There's a scene where Marveler, the spaceship, just crashes into the mountain. Like, doesn't even try to land, just like head on straight into the side of a mountain.
I mean, I guess Garai knows it's going to take it will survive, so why even try?
Right, yeah. The evil lair for Dr. Monster or Professor Monster is just inside the newspaper office. Yeah,
that was weird. Because like, what is his
Amazoness?
Yeah, she literally just gets dressed in street clothes and walks out a door into a news office, and I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's like a portal or something.
Maybe, but that's never made very clear. So
yeah.
I'm assuming it's just sort of the unused basement of the news office.
Yeah.
Which is like a weird interpretation of the Daily Bugle? ?
Yeah.
Well, kind of a weird interpretation of J. Jonah Jameson to make the editor-in-chief kind of the villain.
I mean, in fairness, out of all of Spider-Man's characters, Jameson can inflict the most damage very easily.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to get to Amazoness in just a second, but there's a scene where Takuya just runs out into the street screaming, "Who are you? Who are you?" And I'm just thinking, like, what does his neighbors think of him? This guy who is running a motorcycle in an enclosed space and then runs out into the street just screaming. Oh man. So Amazoness looks like she has to poop constantly. Her face, she has resting bathroom face.
It's like from Chowder, like, he seems grumpy, but I just think she has to poo.
Yeah. Exactly.
What did you guys think of the putties? I mean, the Iron Cross Army.
Okay. Why do they have those giant noses?
The beaks. Yeah, the beaks are so weird.
They're supposed to be beaks? I thought they look like...
I'm guessing they're supposed to be beaks. It doesn't really explain it, but it looks like beaks to me.
Just remove them. And also, they run, flip, flip. By the time, like, just run or just flip. Just, like, I don't need to see your cat's routine.
Yeah, it was one big dance off in some of those battles between them and Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a little note that says the people editing this show were on crack. Because the editing is so crazy and I love it. I love it.
I will say, as the series progresses, it feels like they tighten the editing a bit.
Yeah,
Okay,
they
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Later episodes feel a little bit better.
Yeah, they do. But the first few episodes are so bad with the editing. It's so crazy. But I mean, this just when there's a scene in the first episode where Takuya gets the message from Gaira to come and find him, and he was just fixing to take off on his motorcycle with his little brother on the back of the motorcycle, and what he does is just gets his little brother to stand off the motorcycle and then just takes off. Like, hopefully someone's there to take care of the little brother.
I think that kid's so annoying that no one's going to kidnap him.
No one's going to take him.
I don't know who's more annoying, the Kennys from this show or the Kennys from Gamera. I'm not sure yet.
Okay, the Kennys from Gamera are annoying, but they mean well. This kid's a brat.
Yeah. This kid, like, I mean, this kid's worse than the Ultraman Kenny.
From the like I feel like he's worse because I'm just like, why are you here? Just go. We like the last thing Spider-Man needs is an actual annoying kid besides him, instead of the metaphorical annoying kid known as Life.
Right. Yeah. He serves no purpose. He's really annoying, especially in the second episode. The second episode, it gets even worse.
Isn't that sort of a trope, though, guys, of like Japanese television? Anyway,
it is.
There's always a kid somewhere.
No, yeah, I think it would be more entertaining if the kid was the voice of reason.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a trope, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not annoying.
Well, true.
So yeah,
especially the fact that most kids want to see Spider-Man. They don't want to see them. Like, I'm boring. I'm already a kid. I want to see Spider-Man.
Right.
But they have to make it relevant, Chris.
It's Spider-Man.
It's Spider-Man. Oh man. Yeah, no, it's a Japanese thing too, because it's mostly in Japanese shows that you see more of the kid character who tags along with the heroes.
90s television in America.
Yeah,
that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Power Rangers Turbo.
I was just fixing to say Power Rangers Turbo, but yeah. Oh man.
Am I the only one that actually likes Turbo? I feel like I'm the only one.
I like Turbo. I just don't like that character.
Well,
I think Turbo got better, sadly, when the Zeo actors left and we got the new guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Anything else you guys want to talk about with the first episode before we move on to the next one?
No,
I got a few things to say.
Okay.
So let me crack my fingers on my nerd mice.
Here we go.
So I don't mind a lot of these reinterpretations of the characters. What I do mind is a few things with our Spider-Man's motivation that just kind of feels wrong. Like the whole thing about Spider-Man is great power comes great responsibility. That is integral to his character. Of any version of Spider-Man. You got even like characters that aren't Peter Parker but are new versions of Spider-Man, like Miguel O'Hara, or even they're always, or Miles Morales is another example. Great power, great responsibility is intrinsic to the mythos, the very core of Spider-Man. So having this version of Spider-Man's motivation is strictly revenge kind of feels wrong.
Yeah, it does seem kind of wrong from that perspective, and I'm totally with you. I mean, there is a point in the first episode where he says, "I'm an emissary of hell, here for revenge," and it's just like, okay, that's not Spider-Man's thing.
Especially like remember in his first appearance, he was going to get revenge on the burglar, but then he found out the burglar was the one he let go away, and he was like realized consequences. Another thing that just bothers me, it could be a licensing thing, but from what I researched, it wasn't an issue. Professor Monster is not intimidating, or his goons.
No,
he's weak.
Yeah,
It would have been really cool to see like an interpretation. Like I feel like if you got Spider-Man, you should be able to just get his Rogues Gallery. Like imagine a tokusatsu version of Green Goblin or Doc Ock, or the way to emulate him, you might as well be Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
and have like the Beast Bem just be like monster versions of Spider-Man villains. Like imagine Lizard is just like a giant monster. Rhino, Shocker, Electro.
Yeah, it is really weird that they didn't use more characters because they did have the rights to them, or they could have, because the deal that Marvel and Toei had was they could use any of the characters. So it doesn't make sense for them to just stick with ones. But I think it just comes down to it might have came down to the toy, the toy line, because any toy sales that they made from this series would have been, or characters that they created, or not characters, but the characters that they used would have had to been split with Marvel. Whereas any new characters that they created, they didn't have to split with Marvel.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and it's kind of So that's what I think. That's just me, but that's what I think it comes down to.
No, that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense.
It does, because a lot of these shows, if you think about it, they're sort of at the mercy of like toy licensing too.
Yep.
They're thinking like several steps ahead. Like, can we even market this as a toy? Period. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah,
but it's still disappointing. But to Chris's point, it is disappointing.
Hopefully Marvel will make a comic, and I'd like to see that. That would be a really cool idea for a Spider-Man comic, and they just have reinterpretation versions of his Rogues Gallery. Especially now with hindsight, because there's even more villains that was created after the series. So can you imagine like Spider-Man version of Venom?
Yeah, it's kind of like how DC is. I think DC is the ones that are actually doing it, but they're doing their Batman 66 series, like the way that they, you can actually go and read the comic book that continues the story of Batman 66, the old Adam West TV show. And in the comic book, they have like the 1966 version of all of these villains that they didn't show in the TV show. And so having something like that at Marvel for the 1970s Spider-Man would be really interesting.
Yeah, especially, Marvel got the rights to Ultraman. So they're already dipping their toes with tokusatsu. One other thing I want to get to before we move on to the second episode.
Sure.
It's just a story thing that kind of annoys me. So Takuya's dad dies, and that should be the character motivation. And then Garai dies again. Well, like literally 2 minutes later, it kind of feels redundant to have two old guys die to be his character motivation.
Yeah, for sure. I have in my notes, I wish Zordon Juan Kenobi could have stayed around longer.
I mean, he's in spider form, but he's like, kill.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Like to have two motivations that are pretty much the exact same makes zero sense.
Yeah, double down on the motivation. That's what I always say. Going back to what Chris said about how this storyline or the motivations there seem a little off from our perspective because of what we're used to with Spider-Man. I have to mention it because I know if this person is listening, then they'll talk about it. But someone mentioned on Twitter, and I can't even remember who it was specifically, but someone mentioned in reference to the Godzilla anime that it is a Japanese trope to take a character that's basically like a Captain Ahab character who's so dedicated to getting revenge and making them a sympathetic character.
Revenge is a strong motivator for a lot of Japanese media. I mean, watch how many animes where the character's motivation is revenge.
Right. Yeah. So that's a thing for some reason in Japanese, like we tend to, from a Western standpoint, try to downplay revenge or show that revenge is not the way to go. Whereas in Japan, they have a more balanced view of revenge, that revenge is sometimes a good thing, if a positive thing. And so having a character that's obsessed with getting revenge is not necessarily a negative thing in Japanese culture. So I just wanted to mention that, because it is weird if you are someone who's used to Spider-Man, because the idea of revenge is not what Spider-Man's about. But knowing that this is so adapted to a Japanese culture, it makes sense.
Well, in a lot of ways,
yeah, totally.
In a lot of ways, that seems to me to be a little bit more honest, because, you know, we're all human and we all have that bent about us that when someone wrongs us, we do want revenge. I mean, it's weird. I guess not weird is the right word, but it's different from a Western perspective. But it's also very interesting how they handle themes like that. Like the whole Heisei trilogy for Godzilla is centered around getting revenge on Godzilla, pretty much.
I will say, as the series progressed, this Spider-Man does eventually start focusing more on human lives, which you know, like at that time, like the first episode rubbed me the wrong way, but later on, this is where we start seeing a bit of the Spider-Man we know and love. Like he saves people. His motivations, like, you know, not only take down the Iron Cross army for revenge, but also just how they're genuinely evil people. He's still valuing, you know, protecting people. So I do like that. It's just the first episode.
I was gonna say, even in episode 3, we start seeing glimpses of that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We can talk about that when we get to episode 3, because I think episode 3 really kind of shows that progression. You know, to where you like Chris said, where you see more of the Spider-Man we know and love as a Western audience. But before we get to episode 3, I don't have much to say about episode 2. So what do you guys? Let's start with Chris. Let's start with Michael, because he needs to give us the plot breakdown for episode 2.
Okay, I will do that as soon as I scroll up here to get to the plot breakdown. Okay, so in episode 2, we get a flashback of how Planet Spider was taken over by Professor Monster, as well as some flashbacks to Spider-Man gaining his powers from Gyra. Is that how we say that?
Yeah, okay.
Gyra. In the present day, Spider-Man must stop one of the monsters from destroying a train filled with rocket fuel.
Yep. So real simple. And again, all these plots are pretty simple. So Chris, going back to you, what are some things about this episode that you liked and didn't like?
Ooh, so what I liked, the flashback sequence in Feudal Japan was pretty cool. I thought that was a pretty neat thing.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
I like seeing sci-fi elements in Feudal Japan. I'm always a sucker for that. And, you know, I like the idea where the episode, when we actually get to the present, our main character has a balance his normal life and Spider-Man. That's just classic Spider-Man. That's just not even classic Spider-Man. That's just classic superhero in general.
Yeah,
I do like that. Disliked. Oh god, this is definitely the weakest episode out of the 3 I watched, because it's just one gigantic recap episode, and already a lot of tokusatsu and animes have recap episodes, but that's usually devoted for the midway point of the series. Having borderline a recap episode in the middle of not even the middle, the second episode is kind of egregious. Like, I don't mind the flashbacks, because, you know, that's actually an origin for a big part. But we already saw the origin of our Spider-Man. We literally just seen the last episode. So it just felt like filler, and it was just, you know, kind of like dull, because just, I already seen this. So I don't need to see it. And the fight in this episode was so quick, where it's just like, oh, that's it? Okay, then.
Yeah.
And the monster just looks really, like, I don't want to be mean, but the monster in this episode looked pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah, he he was really bad.
He was really rough looking.
Michael, you want to share your likes and dislikes about this episode?
Sure. I'm going to agree with Chris. This is probably the weakest of the 3 that we're going to be talking about today. I have to agree that mainly because they spent 11 minutes giving us a recap of the backstory. Now, granted, some of those moments were important, but not 11 minutes worth when we've only got 24 minutes to enjoy the show.
Right.
I did like the flashbacks to feudal Japan. I think in my notes, I had here, sort of recapping the conflict between Gyra and Professor Monster was sort of interesting because it gave context to why Spider-Man needs his powers and why he needs to carry on this legacy. And of course, Gyra's helmet is ridiculously awesome. That was, I had a good laugh at that.
Kind of wish he was wearing the Spider-Man costume.
Yeah.
A little, I can
where
see
did the
that.
Spider-Man costume come from?
Because it was a weird mix of this this turn of the century Roman armor with Halloween decorations
Yeah,
painted on top of him.
Galactus will be looking at his helmet and be like, "Okay, calm down, dude."
Yeah, tone it down just a bit.
But the choreography was okay. The battles with the Iron Cross army were all right. But the final battle between the Brain Kaiju, that's what I'm calling it because I can't remember the name of it, and Leopardon was a little bit meh. It was just boom, boom, done. I mean, it's just nothing to it.
And this is where the editing was at its most annoying, honestly.
Oh yeah. I mean, just the first. Is it the first scene or one of the early scenes where Takuya is on his motorcycle and you just get this same shot of this motorcycle over and over and over and over again, and it's just like, come on. Yeah, I'm kind of with you guys. I mean, I do like some of the flashbacks to Planet Spider, to feudal Japan, but other than that, the flashbacks, and especially the narration over the flashbacks was kind of just
It's very much tell and show, and a lot of telling.
Yeah. So it's definitely, of the three, it is the weakest episode. So we can just move on to the next one.
The best.
So episode 3, Michael, you want to give us the plot breakdown?
Sure. So in episode 3, someone is impersonating Spider-Man while committing crimes. Is it the work of the Iron Cross or someone else involved?
Yeah. So, Chris, what are your likes and dislikes on this episode?
Okay, the plot point of someone framing Spider-Man is classic Spider-Man. It is one of the most classic stories you will ever see of the character. I really like they included that. The series, I love the fight scenes at night because the suit strikes a lot better. Like it just pops. It looks good, and it kind of adds more to the superhero element. Amazon is God, that name. Why can't it just be Amazon? Like Amazon's already a female connotated name.
Right, exactly.
She's a much this is the episode where she basically steals the show. She is a much better villain than Professor Monster.
Oh, she is. She is.
Yeah.
And the machine bem in this episode's really cool. Like, I actually think he's my favorite one so far because I kind of like the light thing. I like how this Spider-Man was smart. Decided to try to fight him at night, didn't work. Fought him in the day. And we have a Spider-Man that's actually thinking to defeat the villain, not just immediately bring out the giant robot. There's actually some strategy to this, like a superhero story where you gotta you have a new villain, you gotta figure out the weakness. And I'm always a sucker for that, as well as just a sucker for fights in theme parks because I live in Florida and we're surrounded by theme parks. And I was just superhero fight in a theme park is pretty cool, and we get something like that. And I always love, especially they fought on the roller coaster. I love that.
Oh yeah, that was really funny and that was really good. I don't know what to call them, but the putties, the putties just riding on the army. Yeah, the Iron Cross Army soldiers just riding on the roller coaster, coming to run over Spider-Man. Oh man, yeah, it's a great episode. I'm totally with you on that, Chris. That it's classic Spider-Man, having him framed for something that he didn't do, and him trying to clear his name and getting skewered in the newspapers. That's classic Spider-Man.
Makes me wish there was a Jameson. It really makes me wish, especially that Japan tokusatsu had its fair share of newspaper guys. I mean, look at the Showa Godzilla films.
Oh yeah, yeah. They totally could have had a Japanese J. Jonah Jameson, and it would have been great.
I also kind of liked how Spider-Man tried to, give redemption to the thief. Feels very much in character where Spider-Man tries to talk to villains sometimes or people in the wrong. And we got he tried to say hey, this is not a good thing to do. You need to not be a thief. You need to try to turn yourself around. And I like that. It's very it shows humanity to the Spider-Man, not just, murder, kill, emissary of hell.
Yeah, Michael. I was just thinking that, like we said earlier, this is the episode where you get to see the turn towards the more heroic Spider-Man that we know and love here in the West. What are your thoughts on this episode?
I liked just the. I'm trying to think of how to word it, but I just like the overall editing of the show. I guess that's how you I guess that's the best way I know how to put it, because it was paced. I feel like this episode was paced fairly well. The machine bim, the kaiju in this one was really cool. I'm a sucker for bug kaiju. I just think they're awesome. This episode I noticed did suffer a little bit from stock footage. I know that's kind of weird this early on, but sort of sequences where he's climbing up buildings and stuff, it was stock from the very first episode, which we'll probably, I think we see a lot more. We'll probably end up seeing a lot more of that stock footage later on. It was just, it was just darkened just to give a night scene appearance. But I'm with Chris, the trope of Spider-Man being impersonated and then sort of forgiving or giving redemption to his impersonator. That was interesting. Yeah, just overall, I had a lot of fun with this episode, and some of the fight sequences were great. The choreography I feel like was stronger in this episode than than the other two, and just sort of I like the hand-to-hand combat, sequences in the final battle with Leopardon and the Kaiju. So yeah, I mean, it was just, this one was a lot of fun. And to Chris's point, I like the part where Spider-Man figured out a way to defeat his enemy, by exposing him to daylight, which, actually makes a lot of sense. You can't, light does look a little less bright in the daylight. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and that's one thing we haven't really touched on too much in our review of these 3 episodes is the giant robot. I mean, that's one of the things that why we're covering this. For anybody who's not aware and hasn't been following Kaiju Weekly on social media, May is our mech month. We are doing for the next 4 episodes. Well, yeah, for the next 4 episodes, our theme is mechs, and so that's why we're covering this one, because of the giant robot. And I think the fight between Leopardon and this kaiju was probably the best of the 3.
Yeah, and Leopardon is such a fantastic design. It is sleek and boxy, but it's not like a brick. I do kind of wish there was a bit more of the Spider-Man. Not it has to look like a spider, but I kind of wish it kind of had Spider-Man's colors.
Yeah. Now I like the design, just like you. I like the design. It's very classic mech. If you know the anime mechs that were around at that time, like Mazinger, that it fits right in with the designs of the mechs that were around in anime form. There is a design thing in it that I don't like, and that is, why does the mouth look like a cat's anus?
Oh God! It's supposed to be like a spider's mouth.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to resemble sort of the
mandibles.
The mandibles, yeah. In a spider's mouth. It's just
a little round, circle sphincter-looking thing.
They would have been much better served to just give it a regular human mouth, sort of like a Megazord, sort of like the
the face guard.
Yeah, like the face guard, sort of like, what was the one I compared it to, Travis, the other day? The Thunder Dragon Zord, the red.
Oh, Dragon... yeah, the Thunder Megazord.
Yeah, sort of like that, it would have been better off instead of giving it a cat's butthole for its mouth.
Yeah. I mean, I have a pet cat. I wake up every morning with a cat's butt in my face. I know what a cat's butt looks like, and that looks like a cat's butt.
I wouldn't share that with everybody, Travis, but I guess it's too late.
Hey, you cannot own a cat without having a cat's butt shoved in your face by the stupid animal that doesn't leave you alone until you feed it. Oh man. But yeah, no, I just that's it looks like a cat's butt in its mouth.
But no, but you're right. The Leopardon I was pleasantly surprised by how much I like Leopardon. I like it so much. I wish that I could get my hands on a collectible version of it.
Apparently, they're re-releasing the Solo Chogokin one.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah,
I've seen that one. That one looks super cool. Like their versions of I think the Dragon Zord and the Megazord look super sweet. I like it.
Yeah. And Leopardon is like one of the things that basically what most comic fans remember. Like, this is the show where Spider-Man drives a giant mecha. And they translate like that over into Spider-Verse event where it was actually a major part of the plot line to defeat the villains of that storyline, the Inheritors. And they used it again in Spider-Geddon, and it was even cooler. Like, I'm going to geek out a little bit, but when they were fighting the Inheritors Return, Miles Morales used the power cosmic to wield Leopardon's sword. It was the coolest thing.
Yeah, I think they really did a good job of introducing the Japanese Spider-Man in those events in the comic books. That was really cool. Those events were just crazy, over the top fun anyway. For people who may not be as familiar with Spider-Man, and I mean, we've already been talking about it for this long, but when people who are new to Spider-Man and new to comic books, when you hear a Japanese Spider-Man, they may think of Spider-Verse the movie and Penny Parker.
Penny, and Penny, and the Penny in the comics is completely different to the Penny in the movie.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because Penny in the movie is more like the kawaii anime parody, while Penny in the comics is more or less a love letter to 90s anime.
Right. Yeah. It's more like a almost like a
Evangelion.
Yeah, Evangelion type character. But yeah, so they may be familiar with that version of a Japanese Spider-Man, but this isn't Penny Parker. This isn't the spider robot that she has control over. This is completely different. This is a giant, like Michael compared to a Megazord.
It is a Megazord. Like, basically, when you say best way to like when people were like, "What do you mean Japanese Spider-Man?" Just say it's Power Rangers, but with Spider-Man.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's actually a good segue into the history fun facts segment that I have planned here.
Before we move on, can I just say something that it's not really a dislike, but kind of a nitpick, or things I wanted from the third episode?
Yeah.
I was going to say one thing I wanted to talk about before we move on. I kind of wish that villains, because this storyline would have been perfect for Chameleon or Mysterio.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it would.
Yeah, it definitely would have. It definitely would have. Oh man, I Chris, since you are a comic book fan, have you ever looked at the Batman 66 comic books that are coming out, or that have been coming out?
I have not. I'm more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy. I love DC, but when it comes to comics, I'm mostly a Marvel guy.
Okay. I hear you. I am too. I really like Marvel, but I mean, I go back and forth on them. But yeah. The idea behind those 1966, it's comic books that are coming out right now, but it's set in the world of the 1966 Adam West Batman TV show. And so they have all of like the reinterpretation of Harley Quinn and Bane and all these other DC characters, these Batman characters that you didn't get in that original 1966 show. And I think there was even a crossover between that and Green Hornet. Yeah. And they did it in the comic books, and they did a crossover with the 70s Wonder Woman, because she also has her own comic book series too. So it's really neat. And so just knowing that that is something I wish Marvel could do. just take and make an entire comic book run just in the world of this Spider-Man, not tied to any other Spider-Man, just not tied to the larger Marvel universe, just in the world of this TV show, and explore the different characters and this interpretation of those characters.
What's funny is there, as far as I'm aware, there have been three manga versions of Spider-Man. They're not connected to the show, but we had 3 different manga series. One during the 70s, which is basically Control F Spider-Man to have a Japanese name.
Right.
And along with his villains, there was Spider-Man J, which is like is aimed for younger kids. And then there was Mangaverse, which is basically Marvel taking trappings of Japanese like manga and interpreting these characters where Spider-Man's like a ninja.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's something that they can do. I wonder if it has something to do with, but then I don't know if it has anything to do with rights, because like you said,
it has nothing to do.
Yeah, he's in the Spider-Verse. Right. So I don't know what's I guess it just
they're not I guess not enough fandom or something.
Yeah, maybe. Although, how often does Marvel actually listen to their fans anyway? Anyway.
I mean, let's balance it out. When DC has been actively angering their fans lately.
Right. Yeah, true. So we're going to get into our fun fact segment. So I wanted to use the fun fact segment as a history lesson on this version of Spider-Man and its ties to Power Rangers and other well-known tokusatsu series. Because when people watch this, like Michael, when you watch this and you already know about Power Rangers, you may say, oh, well, this is just, Japan taking and merging Power Rangers and Spider-Man together and doing their own weird thing.
Right.
But it's the other way around, really. Power Rangers and Super Sentai that got turned into Power Rangers when it was brought to America was inspired by Spider-Man. If it wasn't for Spider-Man, we wouldn't have Power Rangers.
Or at least a version of Power Rangers we know and love.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like we would still have like the concept of Power Rangers, but it would look completely. I feel like it would look somewhat different, if not completely different, than what we know it as.
I don't think we would. I really don't think we would, because if you look at let's get into the history of it that I have. I'll read through my notes. So in 1971, Toei produced the series Kamen Rider, which introduced a new kind of hero, what is called the Henshin hero. That's heroes that could transform from their civilian to their superpowered self. And it's kind of like Japanese take on the secret identity that Superman. People know and love from superheroes in the West.
Yeah, because Ultraman was basically the granddaddy of all that.
Right, yeah. Then after the success of Kamen Rider, Toei went on to create 2 more Henshin hero shows in the early 70s called Go Ranger and JAKQ. Now, these are called Sentai. These were the first 2 Sentai series. But they did not have robots. They did not have Kaiju. They didn't have any of the trappings that we know from later Super Sentai series.
Mm-hmm.
And they were more like spy and adventure stories, just with these superpowered heroes.
Basically like the 1960s Batman show.
Yeah. Now, the reason why I say that without Spider-Man, we wouldn't have Power Rangers, and why I think that, like you guys said, we would have Power Rangers, but we wouldn't have it the same way. These 2 Sentai series were successful, but they were not successful enough to continue. In fact, Toei had actually, after JAKQ, they had actually put the Sentai series to rest.
Okay.
So they weren't planning, at least from my research, they weren't planning on doing any more Sentai series. Now, around the same time, Toei and Marvel Comics had a licensing deal where Marvel would produce comic books based off of some of Toei's anime characters, and this led to Marvel also licensing out their characters for Toei to turn into their own tokusatsu series.
Yeah, Marvel had the Shogun Warriors, which tied into Mattel's toy line as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so so they got Shogun Warriors and a few other things that Toei had. And then what Toei did was they took Spider-Man to begin with, and then they were also going to do a few more, but those ended up changing. But they turned Spider-Man into the Spider-Man that we just watched and that we reviewed today. But originally, they did want to create a faithful adaptation of Spider-Man. They weren't going to add any of the crazy giant robot, kaiju, any of that stuff that we see in the Japanese Spider-Man. But what happened was Toei had a toy deal with Bandai that was already established. And Bandai, the people at Bandai said, hey, if you're going to market Spider-Man, you need more than just Spider-Man, because Spider-Man alone cannot sell toys.
Okay.
And so, because, you know, if kids buy a Spider-Man toy, then that's the end of it. You know, they've already got their Spider-Man toy. What else do they? So they had to create different things to try to sell more toys. And since in anime form, because right about this time, Mazinger Z was very popular. We already talked about how Gigantor had kind of started.
It was the rise of the super robo genre.
Yeah, the super robot genre was already taking off. So Toei decided, let's give Spider-Man a giant robot and give him giant monsters to fight. And that's where this Japanese Spider-Man, you know, came from. Now this idea of a piloted giant robot had never been done in tokusatsu form before. It was already popular in anime, but it was not, you know, in tokusatsu. And it became so popular that Toei decided to revive their Super Sentai series and give the Super Sentai characters giant robots to pilot. Now, this is where it gets a little kind of twisted around in the history, because the first of this new Super Sentai series was Battle Fever J. Now, Battle Fever J, me and Chris mentioned it earlier, Michael,
okay, is
kind of Captain Japan. Because the idea was for Toei to do an adaptation of Captain America. And they had the idea that they would have a team of superheroes led by basically Captain Japan, which he wasn't called that, but that was the idea. And each of the characters would be from a different country. And so that's what Battle Fever J is. But Toei ran into a problem because Marvel had actually, by that point, already licensed out Captain America to Universal to make some kind of really awful...
The Brett Ratner movie.
Yes.
Oh, no.
The really awful Captain America movie.
What am I missing? What am I missing here?
Nothing. Your life would be very enriched if you don't watch these Captain America movies.
Yeah, so there were some Captain America movies from back in the day that were really awful. And so, yeah.
His shield was a frisbee.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same one with the live action Thor?
No, that is not related to the Incredible Hulk show.
Okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, that was the Incredible Hulk had Thor in it. Yeah, and they had rubber ears attached to the helmet.
No, that was a different one. That was a different one.
That was a different one? Okay.
The Brett Ratner one. Yeah, that was the 90s direct-to-video movie. The Brett Ratner ones, he had like a motorcycle helmet, basically. Instead of a mask.
Okay. That's right. They all blend together in my mind because
they're terrible.
Yeah, they're all terrible. So, but licensing deal, Toei couldn't do Captain America the way they wanted to. So they adapted it or changed things around and made it Battle Fever J, and they decided to make Battle Fever J, instead of connected to Spider-Man or Spider-Man, they made it part of their new line of Sentai series called Super Sentai. And they gave them giant robots to pilot. So the Super Sentai formula was a complete success, and Toei continued to produce more series. Once Battle Fever J ended, they started doing another one, then another one, and they continued on. The next one after Battle Fever J was Digimon Electric Fighters, and its direct sequel, Taiyo Sentai Sun Vulcan. Now, I hinted at this earlier in the episode because Sun Vulcan was the series that caught Stan Lee's attention. Stan Lee really, really wanted to adapt Sun Vulcan, and really a lot of tokusatsu shows, into an American show for American audiences.
Because he already had success with, not only with the Shogun Warrior comics, so he had Godzilla.
Yeah, and he really loved these like Japanese superheroes and stuff, and he really wanted to adapt them for American audiences. And so he took the old, basically, VHS type tape, and showed it to basically the person who was his boss at the time, who was a woman by the name of Margaret Loesch. She was the president and CEO of Marvel Productions, so the TV and side of Marvel. And he was like, I really want to do this. We need to adapt this into something for American audiences. So her and Stan Lee took that around to all of the networks and tried to sell them on it, saying, hey, here's this crazy Japanese show, Super Sentai Sun Vulcan. We want to adapt it. And all of the networks turned them down. Most of them said it's too violent. Some of them said it's disgusting looking because the monsters aren't cute. They're weird looking. And right. Some of them said it's just too weird. It's too Japanese. So that was unsuccessful. So Stan Lee wasn't able to do his adaptation of it. But then fast forward to the 80s, and you have a new player join the game, Haim Saban.
Oh boy.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Haim Saban decides he wants to adapt Super Sentai. He had taken a business trip over to Japan. There was nothing on TV when he was staying in his hotel except for these Super Sentai shows that were on. And so he watched them, and he's like, hey, we can adapt that to an American audience. So he had the idea. And so he took his idea for an adaptation of Super Sentai to a lot of the networks, and a lot of networks turned him down until he got to Fox Kids. Now, Fox Kids was a relatively new network that was set up, and the head of Fox Kids was Margaret Loesch, who was before this was the president and CEO of Marvel Productions, the one who was with Stan Lee trying to sell Super Sentai to all of the networks. And so when he brought it to her, she's like, hey, I recognize that. That's a show, I wanted to bring that to American audiences back in the day. And so they came together, and she staked her entire career on the success of an American adaptation of Super Sentai. And the networks gave her the okay. They went ahead with it. Her and Saban produced Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and of course, the rest is history. So from Kamen Rider to this weird, bizarre adaptation of Spider-Man to a weird spy series that became a giant robot series to Power Rangers, one of the most popular franchises of the 90s and onwards.
It's still going.
Yeah, it's still going. All of those shows, well, not Spider-Man, but like Super Sentai is still going, and Power Rangers is still going. So without Spider-Man, this weird that most people who are not familiar with it will say, what the heck is this?
Like it's almost a meme.
Yeah, it is. It is a meme. In fact, a lot of information that I found on this, some of the most informative stuff that you can find on Spider-Man is from knowyourmeme.com. Like they have sources and everything for a lot of the history of Spider-Man. And but without that, we would not have Power Rangers.
That is okay. You going through all that history, I didn't know a lot of the history of Power Rangers. Now, I'm like I said, I was going into this knowing that it has some tie-ins, but I didn't know exactly how tightly the tie-ins were.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me appreciate this show even more now, knowing how influential it was.
Yeah, and I have a few sources that I got all of my history from, so I will include those in the show notes. But one of the sources is there's a Netflix series, if you haven't watched it, The Toys That Made Us, and they do an entire episode on the Power Rangers, and there's a lot of breakdown of the history of how Stan Lee wanted to adapt Super Sentai originally, and Margaret Loesch ended up doing it with Haim Saban and everything. So yeah, that's one of the sources. But I had a few sources that
I watched that episode on the Power Rangers, and man, that was a nostalgia trip for sure.
I still need to watch that episode.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. I have a lot of the toys that they talked about in that episode. I still have them in my parents' attic. God, I hope I haven't been up there in years. I hope that when I go there finally, I hope they're still in good shape, because I would really like to revisit some of those things.
Could be worth some money too.
They will. Yeah.
Yeah, some of those ones. Man, I remember when we were doing the first Kaiju quarantine, and we had our little in between each movie, we just kind of chatted and we had stuff playing in the background on the stream. And one of the things that came up a few times was that classic Bandai America Power Rangers commercial from the 90s, and I was like, oh man, I remember that. And I remember seeing the toys for the Zords and always wanting them. I never had the Zords. I had the monsters, and I had the Rangers, but I never had the Zords when I was a kid.
You talking about the ones with you press a button and they flip their heads, like they go from their human, they go from with helmets to without helmets? Is that the ones you're talking about?
Well, I mean, I was talking about the commercial that we showed during.
Yeah, but I was trying to think of which toys it was.
I think it was the more traditional Rangers, like the more posable ones.
Yeah, it was the posable ones, and then they had the Dragon Zord and what is it? The Titanozord.
Titanus.
Titanus.
Yeah,
I had Titanus as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I always wanted that one.
Like one thing that eluded me for years, and I finally found it I think I was in my early 20s. I finally found one, was a Dragon Dagger.
Oh wow!
I know Hasbro it's
they've reissued a lot of that stuff under their Lightning collection,
the Lightning series, but they're meant to be like, more detailed and basically prop replicas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a one they ban Hasbro put out the what's the White Ranger's sword?
Saba.
Saba, that's it. I'm so bad with names.
I have a Saba. Yeah, I had a Saba. I think I still have. It's probably still in good shape. I have no idea. But yeah, that was one of my favorite weapons as a kid. That and the Dino laser. I can't even remember what it's called now at this point. The little laser / knife that they would all carry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, huh.
I know they announced they're going to or it's already going to be released. They're going to have the staff of the Gold Ranger from Zero.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, oh man, it's a nostalgia trip just talking about Power Rangers. I really do want to do a Power Rangers episode of this podcast at some point.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But yeah, I really wanted to break down the history of Spider-Man and how he connected to Power Rangers, because it's easy to look at Spider-Man, the Japanese Spider-Man, and say, oh, that's just the Power Rangers ripoff, when it's not. It really isn't. And if it wasn't for this series, we wouldn't have the Power Rangers that we know and love. Getting into now our final thoughts of, well, actually, before we get into final thoughts, we're not going to do Godzuki scores, because for TV shows, I want to do a Godzuki score at the end of it. So if we cover all the episodes and we get to the end of the series, I want to do a full just Godzuki score for all of them. So instead of doing a Godzuki score, I wanted to see what you guys, I mean, we kind of already said it, but what are your favorite episode? Which one of the episodes that we watched is your favorite? Chris, you want to start?
Yeah, I was going to say episode 3.
Yeah.
Because it balances both the Spider-Man and the Super Sentai like elements, the tokusatsu elements. Because it has both really good Spider-Man stuff and really good Leopardon fight scene.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it feels like this is what I wanted from the series, and and it basically becomes that from here onwards.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Michael?
I'm gonna go with episode 3 as well. Like I said, I went into this totally new, which is exciting, that I get to discover this whole new show that I get to enjoy. But out of the 3 that we got to talk about today, episode 3 is definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and for me too. I mean, 3 is definitely the best one. Although I do really like the first one, just because of how crazy and bizarre it is. Because if you've never seen this and you have no idea what's going on, and you just start that first episode, it just blows your mind.
When I started watching this when I started watching this the other day, I literally said, "What the am I watching?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy. So getting into our final thoughts, we'll start with Chris, just because you guys are, that's the order that you guys are listed on my Discord, so that's why I always start with Chris. Chris, what are your final thoughts on Spider-Man as a whole, these 3 episodes, just any of it? What's your final thoughts?
When it comes to these episodes, it's definitely an example of growing pains with the writing and the characterizations, especially some of the weird character motivations of Spider-Man and the editing itself, where it's definitely clear that, they were kind of like not really winging it, but trying to figure out what they wanted from the series, because they're basically kind of working from a big property from scratch. But as a whole, this series is fantastic for how unique it blends Spider-Man and tokusatsu elements. And as we did in that really big history lesson, this series is monumental to tokusatsu as a whole. Right. And we wouldn't have, Super Sentai, and without Super Sentai, we wouldn't have Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I talked about in that history lesson a lot of how it inspired Super Sentai, but beyond Super Sentai, there were other shows that took the same formula that Spider-Man did and did their own thing, not even just from Toei, but from other companies as well. So yeah, it's hugely influential on the tokusatsu genre.
Does
Michael,
anyone remember?
Oh, go ahead.
Beetleborgs.
Yes. And do you remember VR Troopers?
I remember VR Troopers. Yes.
I remember both of them.
Okay, so here's a really deep cut for you guys. What about the tattooed teenage alien fighters from Beverly Hills?
I've never heard of that one until
recently. When you go after this episode, Chris, go and YouTube that. Oh, it is glorious.
I feel like the best series that try to knock off Super Sentai was Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, only because Gridman did the tokusatsu they based off Gridman is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever did
Tim Curry.
Oh yeah. Huh. Go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, if we ever did a Trash Mountain, a return to Trash Mountain, we should do it on TV shows. And the tattooed teenage alien fighters from Beverly Hills should definitely be a contender. What
the heck is this? Oh my! Now I have seen, like, I pride myself on knowing weird things. That's why me and Rob seem to get along so well, because we both love Trash Mountain.
Yep.
But what the heck is this?
Yep. All that spandex, man. Just take it in.
Oh, that spandex, and their mouths are painted silver. What the heck?
This looks terrifying.
It is scary. It is scary looking. Oh my goodness.
There was also Saban try to get Kamen Rider with Masked Rider.
Yep.
And he decided, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to adapt one of the darkest Kamen Rider seasons.
Yes, Kamen Rider Black, right?
Yeah, Kamen Rider Black. And it's not black because his costume is black. I think it's metaphorically black.
Metaphor. Oh man, yeah. That was my first introduction to Kamen Rider, was through the Masked Rider, because I remember when Power Rangers crossed over with the Masked Rider, and the first really the first episode, because I think that's all they ever did, was just 1 or 2 episodes of Masked Rider.
Yeah, it was the alternate storyline where I think the Rangers went to another planet, or the Masked Rider came to Earth. I can't remember exactly what it was, but
yeah. And so that was my first exposure to Kamen Rider, and then I learned what it was from and started watching a little bit of Kamen Rider. I'm like, hey, I actually like this.
I still need to get into Kamen Rider.
Yeah, I'm only familiar with like Kamen Rider Black, the one that inspired Masked Rider, and the early Kamen Riders. The newer, more modern Kamen Riders, I don't know. And just from seeing clips of them, I really need to watch them.
They look like, just the costume design alone looks fantastic.
Oh yeah. They're just, oh man, I love the costumes for Kamen Rider series. Anyway, my final thoughts on this on Spider-Man before we move on. It's a fun show. It is absolutely so fun. It's cheesy and dated, but that's because it's from that time period. But it's not a masterpiece by today's standards, but you can definitely see the blueprint of what would be added to later shows. And the show really makes me feel a wide range of emotions. You know, when I'm watching it, I laugh, I cry, I wonder why the robot's mouth looks like a cat's butt. Just every emotion. So that's our final thoughts. Anything else before we close the book on the first 3 episodes of Spider-Man?
No. I mean, it's like I said, I was pleasantly surprised by what I found in that series. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. But before we go, Travis, I did go before this episode. I posted a caption contest to the Groupie.
Oh yeah,
and it was of this photo when I first saw the helmet that Gyra had on, and I was like, man, this is nuts. This is just begging to be memed. And so I posted it to the Facebook group, and I told them if they did a caption, if they gave us some captions, I'd give them a shout out. So I'm going to run through these just really, really quickly. Okay. Kenneth Haynes, he said, do you know what happens if you call a phone sex number 24 hours a day? This is what happens, my friend. This is what happens.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Jesse Wilson. When you go to a mosh pit, but when you go to a mosh pit, don't forget your armor. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
I know from experience the horror of accidentally being in a mosh pit.
Oh,
it was my friend. I was with my friends. We were going to like an indie band. Like support them, and the mosh pit happened, but it was like happened too fast, so I was caught in it. And then there was this like I don't want to fat shame anyone, but it was a really big dude was moshing, and I just saw him, and it was like to put the clip from Lion King, Simba's reaction to the wildebeest.
Oh yeah.
Matt,
and that's why I don't like going to live concerts, is the fear of the mosh pit.
Right.
Just a couple more. Say here we got Matt Bell. He said, darn it, Karen, the fins were supposed to be on top. Thomas Lee, have no fear. Silver Samurai is here.
Oh, another Marvel deep cut.
Yeah, Marvel comic book.
Let's see. Chris Shear, I think I'm saying that correctly. Where's my pizza? Yeah, he definitely has a "Where's my food" look on his face for sure. And Mark Myers, honey, that's not a gimp suit. Now go change.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Oh man.
But yeah, that was their shout out for participating in the caption contest. So there you go, guys.
Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, we're gonna close the book on these first 3 episodes of Spider-Man. I hope to come back to the show again and revisit it. We're slowly going through all of the episodes of Ultraman. Now we're also slowly going through all the episodes of Spider-Man. So and when we do it again, we'll have Chris on again because we know how much he loves Spider-Man. So, to close out this episode, Chris, you want to give some not shout outs, but plugs, some of your plugs?
You can follow me on Gargantucast on Twitter at Gargantucast or my personal Twitter at Chris_Kaiju. You can find the show on, where you get your podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Apple Pod, all that stuff. You can find my editorials on the Summon Ghoulish website, which is currently under reconstruction, but should be relaunched sometime into this month in May, and you can read my editorials there. And you can also check out the other podcasts I'm part of, the Summon Ghoulish Network. You can check out Of Gods and Monsters and Ghoulish Cast.
All right. And so if anybody wanted an introduction, like an episode that they can start with that really kind of introduces them to Gargantucast, what episode would you suggest people start with?
I'd say probably check out some of the ones I'm really proud of is the Godzilla King of the Monsters episode, the King Kong 1933 episode, and the Pacific Rim episode we just released.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because you guys are doing Mech Month too.
Yeah, Mecha May.
Yeah, so we got a nice crossover here. So for us here at Kaiju Weekly, we want to thank Chris for joining us because it was a lot of fun. We loved having you on here. And we want to thank everyone for listening and giving us a review. If you want to review us on iTunes, if you want to follow the podcast on social media, you can do that. We are Kaiju Weekly on Twitter, at Kaiju Weekly on Twitter, and Kaiju Weekly Pod on Instagram. You can send questions, comments, or answers to trivia questions to our email, kaijuweekly@gmail.com. You can also find us at the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group. Also follow at Kaiju Groupie 54, that's Michael, on Twitter, and the Kaiju Groupie on Instagram. A big thank you to Brian, Sheeger, and Thorax for supporting us on Patreon. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/kaijuweeklypod. And so the only other thing to do is to do the trivia question that's going to hint to next week's episode. Sticking with Mech Month, we are going to be talking about a mech comic book. So the trivia question, because the comic book is one that I don't think a lot of people are familiar with, I decided to change the question around a little bit. So the trivia question is, what comic book company that currently holds the license to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers published the kaiju-related comic book Mech Cadet U?
Yeah.
So if you know, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say that'll be an interesting episode because I am coming into that one completely fresh as well. So
yeah, I haven't even read that comic. It's been on my sites for a while.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I think you guys would enjoy it. So tune in for all our listeners. Tune in next week to hear more about that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And also, Travis, you did forget, we did launch a YouTube channel for Kaiju Weekly.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so
we
just
did.
To give our listeners a little, or give our listeners more options so that they can check us out, because I know certain people who shall remain nameless don't listen to podcasts, but will watch YouTube. We did go ahead and launch a YouTube channel for Kaiju Weekly, so we're going to be posting that in the show notes as well. so you can have access to that. And so far, I think Travis and I have decided we're just going to publish newer episodes and possibly just clips to older episodes. We're not going to go through the entire catalog. So starting with, I believe, our episode on King Kong Escapes, that'll be episode 1. It's not episode 1, but it'll be the first episode that's published in full to YouTube. And then thereafter, you'll get this episode plus the ones after this as well on YouTube. But we're going to be posting some clips and different things from other episodes on there as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So it's just another avenue for people to enjoy just a couple of crazy guys, a couple of crazy cats talking about giant monster movies. So to close out this episode, and it's a long one, my goodness, I'm going to say, help control the giant monster population. Have your spider mechs spayed or neutered.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great week.
See you guys next week.
Bye.